The flames swallowed everything. 78-year-old Hattie Thorne stood barefoot in the Virginia dirt, her gray windswept hair tangled with ash. Her brown wool coat hung open over a faded blue shirt. Behind her, the cabin her husband built with his own hands 53 years ago collapsed into itself, sending a tower of orange sparks screaming into the twilight sky. She did not scream. She did not cry. She just watched. 3 men circled her like wolves who had cornered something they mistook for prey. The tallest one, Marcus Vance, wore a black hoodie and a beanie pulled low over his forehead. He jabbed his finger toward her face, close enough that she could smell the bourbon on his breath. "I told you to leave, old woman." His voice cracked with the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences. "6 months I've been telling you. But you just had to be stubborn." His brother Darnell stood beside him, smirking, arms crossed over his chest. The third man, a hired hand named Curtis, hung back near the tree line, recording everything on his phone. The orange glow of the fire danced across their faces. What would you do if 3 men half your age surrounded you while everything you loved burned to the ground? Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back, tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Marcus Vance stepped closer. His Italian loafers, $3,000, imported from Milan, pressed into the soot-covered American flag that had fallen from the cabin's porch. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and simply didn't care. 20 cents on the dollar, Marcus said, pulling a folded check from his pocket. "That's my final offer. Take it and go find a nursing home somewhere. Let them change your diapers while I build something that actually matters on this ridge." Hattie's hands, spotted with age but steady as stone, clutched a charred picture frame. The glass had cracked from the heat. Inside was a photograph of her late husband, Sterling, in his Marine Corps dress blues. The Chosen Reservoir, Korea, 1950. "This camp," Hattie said, her voice low and rasping from the smoke, "was a sanctuary. For 50 years, veterans who couldn't find peace anywhere else found it here. Men your grandfather's age. Men who watched their friends die so you could stand there in your fancy shoes and spit on their memory." Marcus laughed. He actually laughed. "Veterans?" He turned to his brother. "She's talking about a bunch of broken-down old men playing cards in a shack. That's not a legacy, Hattie. That's an eyesore. And now," he gestured grandly at the inferno, "it's just smoke." In the distance, through the trees, a woman in the shadows lowered her phone. She had been recording too. But unlike Curtis, she wasn't recording for entertainment. She was recording evidence. Marcus leaned down until his face was inches from Hattie's. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, my crew is coming with a bulldozer. If you're still standing on this dirt when they arrive, they're going to clear you out with the rest of the trash. You understand me?" Hattie met his eyes. Something flickered there, something Marcus was too arrogant to recognize. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defeat. It was patience. "I understand you perfectly, Mr. Vance," Hattie whispered. "The question is, do you understand me?" Marcus snorted and turned on his heel. "Let's go. This place smells like death." The 3 men climbed into a black Escalade and disappeared down the gravel road, leaving Hattie alone with the dying fire and the ghosts of 50 years. She stood there for a long moment, watching the embers rise like prayers into the darkening sky. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something that didn't belong on a woman who looked like she couldn't afford her next meal. A satellite phone. Military-grade encryption. The kind that cost more than Marcus Vance's Escalade. She pressed a single button. 3,000 miles away, in a glass tower overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a phone rang in an office that belonged to the CEO of Thorne Global Logistics, a $14 billion shipping empire that moved cargo across 6 continents. The office was empty, because the CEO was standing in the ashes of a burned cabin in Virginia, wearing a gray house dress and holding a dead man's photograph. Hattie lifted the phone to her ear. "It's me." He made his choice. Begin phase 1. But what Marcus Vance didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that the crazy old woman he had just threatened wasn't some helpless widow squatting on valuable land. She was the widow of a war hero, the founder of a veterans foundation, and the sole owner of a fortune that could buy and sell his entire bloodline 10 times over. And she had just spent 6 months living in that cabin for one reason: to find out if there was any humanity left in the man trying to take it. He had failed the test. Now, she was going to teach him what happened when wolves picked the wrong sheep. What do you think Hattie's first move should be? Expose Marcus publicly, or dismantle him quietly from the shadows? The black Escalade's taillights vanished into the Virginia night like the eyes of a retreating predator. Hattie didn't move. The fire had died down to a heap of glowing coals, and the only sounds were the pop of cooling timber and the distant call of a whippoorwill. Smoke curled through her gray hair. Ash dusted her shoulders like snow. 60 seconds passed. 90. 2 minutes. Then, from the tree line to the east, came the soft crunch of footsteps on pine needles. Measured. Deliberate. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who had spent decades learning how to move without being heard, and was only being heard now because he wanted to be. A man emerged from the shadows. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same Virginia granite as the Blue Ridge Mountains. His hair was cropped military short, silver at the temples. He wore no insignia, no identification, nothing that would tell you who he was or where he came from. But the way he carried himself told you everything. This was a man who had seen the darkest corners of the world and walked out the other side. This was a man who had ended threats that most people would never even know existed. His name was Garrison. No first name. No last name. Just Garrison. He stopped 10 feet from Hattie and stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind his back. His eyes swept the clearing once, cataloging the fire damage, the tire tracks, the sight lines, before settling on the old woman in the gray coat. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was low, quiet, the kind of voice that never needed to be raised because it was always heard. Hattie turned to face him. And in that moment, something shifted. The pitiful widow persona fell away like a mask removed. Her posture straightened. Her shoulders squared. Her eyes, which had seemed clouded and defeated moments before, now gleamed with the cold clarity of a woman who had spent 40 years building an empire from a single delivery truck. "You saw everything?" Hattie asked. "Yes, ma'am. Every word. Every threat. We have it all on thermal imaging as well. The arson investigator will have no trouble establishing point of origin." "The flag." He stepped on it. Deliberately. "We have that too." Hattie nodded slowly. "And the recordings from the locals? The ones with the phones?" "Curtis uploaded his to social media 11 minutes ago. It's already being scraped and archived. He thinks he was recording entertainment." A ghost of a smile crossed Garrison's granite face. He was recording evidence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The coals popped and settled. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, too late as always, for people like Marcus Vance who had learned to work around the law instead of within it. "The board is concerned," Garrison said finally. "You've been undercover at the camp for 6 months. We didn't anticipate Vance would escalate to arson." "I did." Garrison's eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. "Ma'am? Men like Marcus Vance always escalate, Garrison. That's what makes them predictable. Give them enough time, enough pressure, enough silence, and they'll show you exactly who they are." She looked back at the smoldering ruins. "Tonight he showed me." "What are your orders?" Hattie was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her coat and withdrew a small leather journal, the only thing she had managed to save from the fire. It was Sterling's journal from Korea. The pages were yellowed, the binding cracked, but every word inside was seared into her memory. "My husband wrote something in here," she said, after they came down from Chosen. He wrote, "The measure of a man is not what he does when the world is watching. It's what he does when he thinks no one can see." She closed the journal and looked up at Garrison. Marcus Vance thought no one was watching tonight. He thought he was dealing with a helpless old woman with no money, no power, and no recourse. He thought he could burn down 50 years of history and walk away laughing. Her voice hardened. I want him to feel the heat of his own fire, Garrison. But I don't want it fast. I want it slow. I want him to watch his world crumble piece by piece and never understand why until it's too late. Understood. And the authorities? Not yet. Hattie's eyes glittered in the dying firelight. The police in this county are in Vance's pocket. The sheriff, the mayor, half the city council, they all take his money. If we go to them now, he'll slither out of it like he always does. Then how do we proceed? Hattie smiled. It was not a kind smile. We proceed by using the one thing Marcus Vance has never encountered in his entire privileged life: patience. We're going to let him think he's won. We're going to let him build his stage, invite his audience, hang his banners. And then, when he's standing in front of the whole world with that smug grin on his face. She paused. We're going to show everyone exactly what kind of man he is. Garrison nodded once. I'll activate the legal team, the forensic accountants, the federal contacts. Do it quietly. I don't want a single whisper reaching Vance or his people. And you, ma'am? Where will you be? Hattie looked down at the charred photograph in her hands, at Sterling's young face, frozen forever in that moment of hope and determination. I'm going to pay Marcus Vance a visit tomorrow. At his office. In person. Garrison's expression flickered, the closest he ever came to showing surprise. Ma'am, is that wise? He thinks I'm a broken old woman, Garrison. He thinks tonight destroyed me. She tucked the photograph into her coat, next to her heart. I'm going to let him keep thinking that. I'm going to walk into his office and let him humiliate me one more time. Why? Because when a man like Marcus Vance believes he's already won, he stops being careful. He starts making mistakes. And I'm going to be there to watch him make every single one. She turned and began walking toward the road, where a charcoal gray sedan waited in the shadows, armored, bulletproof, worth more than most houses in this county. Oh, and Garrison? She paused without turning around. Find out everything about the Vance family's financial holdings. Every shell company, every offshore account, every handshake deal with local politicians. I want to know where every single dollar came from and where it went. Consider it done. As Hattie disappeared into the darkness, Garrison stood alone in the clearing. He pulled out his own phone, the twin of Hattie's, same encryption, same security protocols, and dialed a number that existed in no directory. The line clicked. The target has initiated hostilities, Garrison said, his voice flat and cold. Commencing Phase 1. He ended the call and looked back at the ruins of Camp Liberty one final time. Marcus Vance had no idea what he had just started, but he was about to find out. What would you do if you had unlimited resources and someone had just burned down everything you loved? Would you forgive, or would you make them pay? The glass tower of Vance Development Group caught the morning sun like a middle finger raised to the old Virginia skyline. Hattie Thorne stood on the sidewalk across the street, her gray house dress now traded for a plain brown cardigan and worn slacks. She had scrubbed the ash from her hair, but she still looked exactly like what Marcus Vance expected her to be, old, tired, and defeated. That was the point. She crossed the street, pushed through the revolving door, and stepped into a lobby designed to make ordinary people feel small. Marble floors, chrome fixtures, a waterfall wall that cost more than most families earned in a decade. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a smile that never reached her eyes, looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I'm here to see Mr. Vance. Marcus Vance. The smile flickered. Do you have an appointment? No. But he'll want to see me. My name is Hattie Thorne. He made me an offer on my property last night. I'm here to discuss it. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly, recognition, mixed with something like pity. Clearly, word had already spread about the crazy old woman and her burned-down shack. One moment, please. 3 phone calls later, Hattie was directed to a waiting area on the 14th floor. The chairs were leather. The magazines were 3 months old. The air smelled like money and contempt. She waited. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Then 3. Other visitors came and went. They glanced at Hattie with curiosity, then dismissal. A man in her expensive suit. A woman carrying architectural blueprints. A lawyer with a briefcase that probably cost more than Hattie's entire wardrobe. They were all seen within minutes. Hattie continued to wait. At the 4-hour mark, a young assistant appeared. He had the nervous energy of someone who knew he was delivering an insult and wasn't sure how the recipient would react. "Mrs. Thorne? Mr. Vance can see you now." Hattie rose slowly, letting her joints creak audibly, playing the part of the fragile widow to perfection. She followed the assistant down a long hallway lined with photographs of Marcus Vance, shaking hands with politicians, breaking ground on developments, standing in front of buildings with his name plastered across the top. The office door opened. Marcus Vance sat behind a desk the size of a small car. He didn't stand when Hattie entered. He didn't offer her a chair. He just leaned back in his leather throne and smiled the smile of a man who had never been told no. "Hattie," he said, drawing out the name like it was a joke. "I have to admit, I didn't expect to see you so soon. I figured you'd need at least a few days to cry about your little campfire." Hattie stood in front of his desk, hands clasped in front of her, head slightly bowed. "I came to talk about your offer, Mr. Vance." "My offer?" Marcus laughed and exchanged a glance with his brother Darnell, who lounged on a couch in the corner, scrolling through his phone. "My offer was yesterday, Hattie. Before your eyesore turned into a barbecue pit. Now." He spread his hands. "Now you've got nothing but a piece of scorched dirt. The value just dropped considerably." "I understand." "Do you?" Marcus leaned forward. "Because here's the new offer. I'll take the land off your hands for 10 cents on the dollar. You can use it to buy yourself a nice little room at the Sunset Village nursing home. I hear they have bingo on Tuesdays." Darnell snickered from the couch. Hattie swallowed hard. "Mr. Vance, please. My husband's journals were in that cabin. His Purple Heart. Letters from the families of men he served with. 50 years of memories. All I'm asking is—" "All you're asking?" Marcus cut her off. "You're not in a position to ask for anything, old woman. You should have taken my deal 6 months ago. You should have taken it last week. But you wanted to play stubborn, and now look where it got you." He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping inches from Hattie's face. She could smell his cologne. Something expensive, something designed to impress, layered over the faint scent of bourbon. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said. "You're going to sign the papers my lawyer is preparing right now. You're going to take whatever pocket change I decide to give you. And then you're going to disappear, because frankly, Hattie, you're embarrassing yourself." "The journals," Hattie whispered. "Please. If there's any chance they survived." "The journals?" Marcus threw his head back and laughed. "Darnell, tell her about the journals." Darnell looked up from his phone with a grin. "I tossed them in the dumpster behind the Quick Mart this morning. The garbage truck already came." Something flickered across Hattie's face. Plus. Marcus drank it in like wine. "See, Hattie, that's the problem with people like you. You hold on to the past like it means something. But it doesn't. The past is dead. The only thing that matters is the future, and the future belongs to people like me. People with vision. People with money. People who understand that progress means clearing away the wreckage of yesterday." He turned his back on her and walked to the window, gazing out at the city skyline like a king surveying his kingdom. "My assistant will show you out. You have until Friday to sign the papers. After that, my lawyers will handle the eviction proceedings, and trust me, Hattie, you don't want that." Hattie stood motionless for a long moment. Then, slowly she nodded. "I understand, Mr. Vance. Thank you for your time." She turned and walked toward the door, her shoulders hunched, her steps shuffling, the picture of total defeat. Marcus didn't bother to watch her go. He was already on his phone, setting up a lunch meeting with one of his investors. He didn't see the look that passed between Hattie and the young assistant who held the door open for her. He didn't see her posture straighten the moment she stepped into the hallway. And he certainly didn't hear the conversation she had in the elevator, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp as a blade. "He threw away the journals. Made sure I knew about it." The pause. "Yes. That seals it. Move to phase 2. Meanwhile, back in Marcus's office, his secretary knocked on the door. "Mr. Vance? I just received a notification from the Securities Exchange Commission. Your company's largest anonymous shareholder has requested an emergency board audit. They're claiming irregularities in your last 3 quarterly reports. Marcus's smile vanished. What? Who is this shareholder? The secretary checked her tablet. The holdings are registered through a trust. I can't find any information about who controls it. For the first time since the fire, something cold slithered through Marcus Vance's stomach. He told himself it was nothing. A coincidence. Some minor investor causing trouble. He had no idea that the trust controlled 43% of his company's voting shares. And he had no idea who was about to vote him out of his own kingdom. What would you do if the empire you built started crumbling, and you couldn't even see who was tearing it down? The Millbrook Community Center smelled like old coffee and older arguments. Folding chairs had been arranged in crooked rows across the scuffed gymnasium floor. A podium stood at the front, flanked by an American flag that had seen better days and a banner that read, Millbrook Town Hall, Your Voice Matters. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. By 7 o'clock, every seat was filled. Farmers in work boots sat next to shop owners in khakis. Teachers rubbed shoulders with mechanics. And in the back row, almost invisible in her plain brown cardigan, sat Hattie Thorne. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't need to. She was there to watch. The side door swung open, and Marcus Vance strode in like he was walking onto the deck of a yacht. His suit probably cost more than most of these people made in a month. His smile was the practiced grin of a man who had learned that confidence could substitute for competence. He was flanked by 2 assistants carrying easels and a woman in heels who looked like she had never set foot in a gymnasium in her life. Good evening, Millbrook. Marcus spread his arms wide as he approached the podium. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I know you have questions about the Vistas project, and I'm here to answer every single one. Behind him, his assistants set up glossy renderings of the proposed development, glass and steel structures that looked like they had been transported from Manhattan and dropped onto the Virginia Ridge. Swimming pools. Spa facilities. A golf course carved out of what used to be forest. Picture it, Marcus said, gesturing at the images. World-class luxury, right here in your backyard. Jobs for local contractors. Tax revenue for local schools. This isn't just a development, it's an investment in Millbrook's future. He smiled out at the crowd like he expected applause. He got silence. A woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. What about the watershed? That ridge feeds into the creek that supplies half the farms in this valley. Marcus nodded, his smile unwavering. Great question. Our environmental consultants have assured me that all water management systems will meet or exceed federal standards. Your consultants, the woman repeated. The ones you paid. They're licensed professionals, ma'am. So were the consultants who approved the Greenview development in the next county. The one that poisoned 3 wells and killed an entire dairy operation. Marcus's smile tightened. That was an isolated incident. Completely different circumstances. Another hand went up. A man in his 60s, wearing a faded VFW cap and a jacket covered in military patches. His name was Earl Washington, and he had been Sterling Thorne's best friend for 30 years. I got a question, Earl said, his voice carrying the gravel of a lifetime of cigarettes and hard work. That land you're trying to build on, you know what it was before it was just dirt, don't you? Marcus tilted his head. It was some kind of camp, I believe. Camp Liberty, Earl said. Sterling Thorne built it in 1952, right after he got back from Korea. Chosin Reservoir. You know about Chosin, Mr. Vance? I can't say I do, Mr. Washington. Earl Washington. Staff Sergeant, United States Army, retired. Earl stood up slowly, his knees popping. Chosin was a battle. December 1950. 30,000 Chinese soldiers surrounded about 12,000 Marines and soldiers. Temperatures hit 30 below zero. They fought for 17 days to break out. A lot of good men didn't make it home. That's very historical, Marcus said. But I'm not sure what it has to do with. Sterling Thorne was one of those Marines, Earl continued, his voice rising. He came home with a purple heart and a head full of nightmares. He built that camp so men like him would have somewhere to go when the world got too loud. For 50 years, veterans came up to that ridge. Men from Korea, men from Vietnam, men from Desert Storm, men from Afghanistan. They came there because Sterling gave them something they couldn't find anywhere else. He paused. Peace. The gymnasium was silent. Even Marcus's assistants had stopped fussing with the easels. And now you come in here, Earl said, with your fancy pictures and your fancy words, talking about progress and investment. You know what I think, Mr. Vance? I think you're the kind of man who puts a price tag on everything because he doesn't know the value of anything. Marcus's mask flickered. For just a moment, something ugly surfaced behind his eyes. Mr. Washington, I appreciate your service. Truly. But sentiment doesn't build economies. That camp was falling apart. It served its purpose, and now it's time for something new. The world doesn't stand still just because we're nostalgic. Nostalgic? Earl laughed, a hard, bitter sound. You think that's what this is? Nostalgia? I think, Marcus said carefully, that the veterans who used that camp are relics of a dead era. Their time has passed. And frankly, Millbrook's time will pass too if you keep clinging to the past instead of embracing the future. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. In the back row, Hattie Thorne's hands tightened on her knees. But she didn't move. She didn't speak. She just watched. Earl Washington stared at Marcus for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. Relics, he repeated. Dead era. He turned to look at the crowd, at the farmers and teachers and mechanics who had known Sterling Thorne, who had attended his funeral, who still laid flowers on his grave every Memorial Day. Then he turned back to Marcus. You don't know whose ghost you're dancing on, Silas Vance. Marcus blinked. It's Marcus. I know exactly what your name is, boy. Earl's voice was cold. I also know what you did to that cabin. The whole town knows. And I promise you this. He pointed one gnarled finger directly at Marcus's chest. You're going to answer for it. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But there's a reckoning coming. And when it gets here, all your money and all your lawyers and all your fancy consultants won't be able to save you from what's headed your way. He sat down. The gymnasium erupted in murmurs. Some people were nodding. Others were whispering to each other. A few, a very few, were looking at Marcus with something like fear. Not fear of him. Fear for him. Marcus cleared his throat. Oh, I think we've heard enough from the Historical Society. Does anyone have questions about the actual project? But the mood had shifted. The questions that followed were hostile, pointed, skeptical. By the time the meeting ended, Marcus hadn't won a single convert. He stormed out the side door without shaking a single hand. In the back row, Hattie Thorne finally allowed herself a small smile. Earl Washington caught her eye as the crowd dispersed. He nodded once, the nod of a soldier acknowledging his commander. She nodded back. The community had witnessed Marcus Vance's true character. They had heard him call their heroes relics. They had watched him dismiss 50 years of sacrifice as nostalgia. Now they knew who he really was. And soon the whole world would know too. Do you think Marcus Vance can still recover, or has he already dug his own grave? The bulldozer arrived at dawn. It rumbled up the gravel road like a yellow beast, its treads grinding against the earth, its engine growling a promise of destruction. Behind it came a white pickup truck carrying 4 men in hard hats and reflective vests. Behind that, a black sedan with tinted windows. Marcus Vance stepped out of the sedan before it had fully stopped. He was dressed casually today. No suit, just designer jeans and a polo shirt that cost more than a working man's weekly paycheck. He wanted to be here for this. He wanted to watch. The camp's remains were barely visible now. The cabin had collapsed into a heap of blackened timber and ash. The only thing still standing was a charred wooden post that had once held a sign reading, Camp Liberty, where heroes find peace. Marcus looked at the post and smiled. Take it down, he told the foreman. All of it. I want this ridge scraped clean by sunset. The foreman nodded and turned to give orders. That was when he saw the man standing in the middle of the road. Garrison hadn't moved since he arrived 2 hours before dawn. He stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind his back, positioned exactly where the bulldozer would need to pass to reach the campsite. He wore a plain gray suit with no tie. His face was expressionless. In his right hand, he held a single sheet of paper. The foreman looked at Marcus. "Sir? There's someone. I see him." Marcus walked toward Garrison with the confident stride of a man who had never been afraid of anything in his life. "This is private property. You need to leave." Garrison didn't respond. He didn't even blink. Marcus stopped 10 feet away. Something about the way this man stood, the stillness, the calm, the absolute absence of fear, made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "I said you need to leave." Marcus's voice was sharper now. "I've got a legal right to be here. I've got permits. You have nothing." Garrison's voice was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried across the clearing like a rifle shot. Marcus froze. "Excuse me? Your permits were revoked at 11 o'clock last night. Your environmental clearance was suspended pending a federal review. And the deed you claim gives you ownership of this land." Garrison held up the paper in his hand. "It's been invalidated." "That's impossible." Marcus snatched the paper and scanned it. His face went white, then red, then a color that didn't have a name. This is some kind of mistake. I paid." "You paid a county clerk named Donald Hester," Garrison said. "Mr. Hester was arrested this morning on 17 counts of fraud, forgery, and corruption. He's currently in a federal holding facility, answering questions about every transaction he's processed in the last 8 years." Marcus's hands were shaking now. The paper trembled. "I'll sue. I'll sue everyone involved in." "Sue whom, Mr. Vance? The Federal Land Trust? The Department of the Interior? The Attorney General's office?" Garrison tilted his head. "This land was never for sale. It was placed in a permanent federal trust by the Thorne Foundation in 1994. Your clerk sold you something that didn't belong to him or to you." The bulldozer driver had climbed down from his machine. He approached slowly, reading the situation the way a man learns to read situations when he works around dangerous equipment. "Sir?" He looked at Marcus. "What's going on?" "Get back in your machine," Marcus snapped. "We're clearing this land today." The driver looked at Garrison. Garrison handed him a second piece of paper, this one with a seal from the United States Marshal Service. "This is a federal injunction," Garrison said. "If you operate that machinery on this land, you will be in violation of a court order. The penalty is up to 5 years in federal prison and a fine of $250,000. The driver read the paper. "Read it again." Then he looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed pity with contempt. "I'm not going to prison for you," he said. He walked back to the bulldozer, turned off the engine, and climbed down. "Boys, pack it up. We're done here." "You can't do this." Marcus screamed. "I own this land. I have rights." "You have nothing," Garrison repeated. "Your deed is worthless. Your permits are canceled. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, your company's bank accounts have been flagged for a national security review. You can't move a single dollar without federal approval." Marcus stood in the middle of the road, surrounded by workers who wouldn't meet his eyes, holding a paper that might as well have been his death certificate. "Who are you?" he whispered. "Who sent you?" Garrison didn't answer. He simply turned and walked toward a charcoal gray sedan that had appeared at the edge of the clearing. The back door opened, and he slid inside. Through the tinted window, Marcus caught a glimpse of white hair, gray wool, eyes that burned with cold, patient fury. The sedan pulled away, leaving Marcus Vance standing alone in a cloud of dust and defeat. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. It was a photograph. Donald Hester, the county clerk, being led away in handcuffs outside the Millbrook courthouse. Behind him, visible through the glass doors, was Sheriff Tom Bradley, the same sheriff who had been on Marcus's payroll for the past 5 years. Bradley was also in handcuffs. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message. "The measure of a man is not what he does when the world is watching. It's what he does when he thinks no one can see." Sterling Thorne, 1951-inch. Marcus stared at the screen until it went dark. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never experienced before, the cold, creeping certainty that he was no longer the predator. He was the prey. And whatever was hunting him had only just begun. What happens when a man who has never faced consequences finally runs out of places to hide? Stay with me, because the next chapter changes everything. The wire transfer failed. Marcus Vance stared at his laptop screen, his finger jabbing the refresh button like a man trying to restart his own heart. The message remained unchanged. Transaction pending federal review. Contact your financial institution. He had tried to move $8 million from his operating account to his personal offshore holdings in the Caymans. $8 million that he needed to cover a loan payment due in 72 hours. $8 million that now sat frozen in digital limbo. Come on, he muttered. Come on, come on, come on. He tried again. Same message. He tried a different account. Same message. He tried his backup account, the one he had never told anyone about, not even his brother. The one registered under a shell company in Delaware, funded through a maze of transactions designed to be untraceable. Same message. Every single account he controlled, 17 in total, spread across 6 banks and 4 countries, had been flagged for national security review. He couldn't access a penny. Marcus grabbed his phone and dialed his banker. Straight to voicemail. He called his accountant. Voicemail. He called his lawyer, the expensive one, the one who had made 3 DUI charges disappear and settled a harassment lawsuit for pennies. Marcus. The lawyer's voice was clipped, professional and cold. I was just about to call you. Jerome, what the hell is happening? My accounts are frozen. All of them. I know. I've been on the phone with federal regulators all morning. The pause. Marcus, I'm going to have to ask you to find alternative representation. What? I'm withdrawing from your case. Effective immediately. Marcus's blood turned to ice. You can't do that. I pay you $400,000 a year. And I appreciate that. But I have other clients, Marcus. Clients who can't afford to be associated with someone under federal investigation for money laundering, fraud, and possible RICO violations. RICO? What are you talking about? I'm a real estate developer, not. The FBI disagrees. They've subpoenaed your records going back 15 years. Your accountant's records too. And Marcus. Jerome's voice dropped. They're looking at the fire. The one at the camp. They've got witnesses saying your brother was seen in the area an hour before it started. The phone nearly slipped from Marcus's sweating palm. That's circumstantial. That doesn't prove anything. Maybe not. But combined with everything else? The forged deed, the bribed officials, the environmental violations. Jerome sighed. I'm sorry, Marcus. You're on your own. The line went dead. Marcus stood in the middle of his corner office. The office with the view, the office with the custom furniture, the office he had dreamed about since he was a hungry kid watching rich men walk past him like he didn't exist, and felt the walls closing in. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother Darnell. Cops at my apartment. They have a warrant. What do I do? Before Marcus could respond, another text came through. This one from a number he didn't recognize. It was a photograph. Sheriff Tom Bradley, the man who had been in Marcus's pocket for 5 years, sitting in an interrogation room. His face was gray. His eyes were hollow. And across from him sat 2 men in suits with badges clipped to their belts. The caption read, "He's talking. How long until he mentions you?" Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. He scrolled through his contacts, looking for someone, anyone, who could help him. His investors. His partners. The politicians he had donated to, the judges he had golfed with, the businessmen who had smiled and shaken his hand at fundraisers. No one answered. Not one. It was as if he had been erased from their contact lists overnight. As if Marcus Vance, the man who had built an empire on this ridge, had simply ceased to exist. He walked to the window and looked out at the city he had planned to conquer. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the streets below. Somewhere out there, in a gray sedan or a glass tower or a federal office building, Someone was orchestrating his destruction. And he still didn't know who. His phone buzzed one more time. Another text from the unknown number. Groundbreaking ceremony tomorrow. 10 a.m. Don't be late. Marcus frowned. The groundbreaking ceremony. He had almost forgotten. It was supposed to be his moment of triumph, the official launch of the Vistas, complete with press coverage, investor presentations, and a champagne toast on the very ground where Hattie Thorne's cabin had stood. He had planned it weeks ago, before everything started falling apart. He had sent out invitations to every powerful person in the region. He had hired a catering company and a PR firm and even a small orchestra. Canceling now would be an admission of defeat. It would signal to everyone that Marcus Vance was finished. He couldn't do that. He wouldn't. He would go to that ceremony tomorrow. He would stand on that stage with his silver shovel and his practiced smile. He would show the world that Marcus Vance was still in control. And maybe, just maybe, whoever was coming for him would finally show their face. What Marcus didn't know was that his enemy had already RSVP'd. And she was bringing guests. How far would you go to save your empire, even when you can feel it crumbling beneath your feet? 6 black Suburbans crested the ridge at exactly 9:58 in the morning. Marcus Vance stood on the temporary stage, silver shovel in hand, watching the motorcade approach with a mixture of confusion and hope. He had invited the governor. He had invited state senators and congressmen and every local official whose palm he had ever greased. Maybe one of them had finally come through. Maybe someone with real power had decided that Marcus Vance was worth protecting after all. The vehicle stopped in a perfect line at the edge of the clearing. Doors opened in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out first, Secret Service, by the look of them, or maybe federal marshals. They formed a corridor from the lead vehicle to the base of the stage. The crowd of 50 or so guests, investors, journalists, local business owners who hadn't yet heard about Marcus's troubles, fell silent. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. Everyone was watching. The back door of the lead Suburban opened. And out stepped Hattie Thorne. But not the Hattie Thorne that Marcus had mocked and threatened and dismissed. Not the bent old woman in the gray house dress, clutching a charred picture frame with trembling hands. This Hattie Thorne stood straight as a rifle barrel. She wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe. Her white hair was swept back elegantly. And on her lapel, catching the morning sun, was a small gold pin, the insignia of the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. She walked up the corridor of suits like a general reviewing her troops. Her eyes never wavered. Her steps never faltered. Marcus felt his smile freeze on his face. "Hattie!" His voice cracked. "What are you? This is private property. You're trespassing." Hattie didn't respond. She just kept walking, up the stairs, onto the stage, until she stood 3 feet from Marcus, close enough that he could see the ice in her eyes. Behind her, another figure emerged from the motorcade. A tall man with silver hair and a face that had appeared on the evening news more times than Marcus could count. The state attorney general. He climbed the stairs and took his position, not beside Marcus, but behind Hattie. Flanking her. Supporting her. "Actually, Mr. Vance," the attorney general said, his voice booming across the clearing, "it's you who are trespassing." Marcus's grip on the silver shovel tightened. "I have a deed. I have permits. I have—" "You have a forged document purchased from a corrupt official who is currently cooperating with federal authorities." The Attorney General pulled a folder from inside his jacket. This land was never for sale. It was placed in a permanent federal trust by the Thorne Foundation in 1994. A trust established to honor the memory of Sterling Thorne and to provide sanctuary for veterans in perpetuity. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Cameras flashed like lightning. Journalists scribbled furiously. Marcus turned to Hattie. "This is insane. You're just some old woman living in a shack. You don't have this kind of power. You don't. Let me tell you who I am, Mr. Vance." Hattie's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. The crowd fell silent. "My name is Harriet Sterling Thorne. My husband, Sterling Thorne, was a Marine who earned the Purple Heart at Chosin Reservoir. When he came home, we had nothing, Just a dream and a determination to build something that mattered. We started with one delivery truck. I drove it myself while Sterling handled the logistics. She took a step closer to Marcus. 40 years later, that one truck became Thorn Global Logistics. $14 billion in annual revenue. Operations on 6 continents. 8,000 employees. And every single share, every single penny, is held in a trust that I control. Marcus's face had gone the color of old ash. You thought I was a helpless widow, Hattie continued. You thought I was weak because I lived simply. You thought my husband's legacy was an eyesore that needed to be cleared away for your glass towers and your swimming pools. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a photograph, the same charred photograph she had clutched on the night of the fire. I stayed in that cabin for 6 months, Mr. Vance. 6 months of your threats. 6 months of your insults. 6 months of watching you bribe officials and forge documents and lie to everyone around you. Do you know why? Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. Because I wanted to give you a chance. I wanted to see if there was any decency left in the man who wanted to buy my husband's sanctuary. I wanted to believe that somewhere, underneath all that arrogance and greed, there might be a human being capable of compassion. She shook her head slowly. You failed the test. The Attorney General stepped forward. Marcus Vance, you are under arrest for arson, fraud, racketeering, bribery of public officials, and conspiracy to commit land theft. You have the right to remain silent. 2 federal marshals appeared at Marcus's sides. The silver shovel clattered to the stage floor. This is a setup. Marcus screamed. This is entrapment. I'll sue every single one of you. Mr. Vance. A new voice cut through his protests. A woman in a gray suit stepped forward from the crowd. She held up a badge. I'm Agent Denise Crawford, Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. We have a warrant for all records related to your offshore holdings, including the accounts registered to Vistas Development LLC, Ridgeline Holdings, and... She consulted her notes. Golden Horizon Trust. The one you thought no one knew about. Whatever color remained in Marcus's face drained away completely. Your accountant has been most cooperative, Agent Crawford added. As has your banker. And your lawyer, the one who dropped you yesterday? He turned over his files this morning. All of them. The handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the man who had called himself a wolf was led down from the stage like a lamb being taken to slaughter. But Hattie wasn't finished. She walked to the microphone at the center of the stage and looked out at the cameras, at the journalists, at the investors who had come expecting a champagne toast and gotten a perp walk instead. 50 years ago, she said, my husband built a sanctuary on this ridge. A place where men who had given everything for their country could find peace. Tonight, that sanctuary will begin to rise again. Not as a luxury resort for people who have never known sacrifice, but as the Sterling Thorn National Veterans Center. A place of healing. A place of honor. A place that will stand for another 50 years and beyond. She paused. And every brick, every beam, every window will be paid for by the seized assets of the men who tried to destroy it. The crowd erupted. Not in protest, in applause. As Marcus Vance was loaded into the back of a federal vehicle, Hattie descended from the stage. Garrison waited at the bottom of the stairs, his face as unreadable as ever. It's done, he said quietly. Not quite. Hattie watched the vehicle pull away, carrying Marcus toward a future of courtrooms and prison cells. His brother is still out there. And the investors who funded this scheme, they need to answer too. We're already on it. Hattie nodded. Then she looked back at the ridge, at the place where her husband's cabin had stood, where his journals had burned, where 50 years of memories had turned to ash. Sterling would have forgiven him, she said softly. He was like that, always looking for the good in people. And you? Hattie's eyes hardened. I loved my husband more than life itself, but I'm not him. I believe in justice. And I believe that people who hurt the vulnerable deserve to face consequences. She turned and walked toward her waiting vehicle. Make sure the press gets everything. Every document, every recording, every transaction. I want the world to see exactly what kind of man Marcus Vance was. And Darnell? The brother? Hattie paused at the car door. He's the one who actually lit the match. Make sure the arson investigators know where to find him. The door closed. The engine purred to life. And Hattie Thorne, billionaire, widow, and architect of the most elaborate act of justice this county had ever seen, disappeared down the mountain road. What would you do if you had the power to destroy someone who had wronged you, and the whole world was watching? The press conference lasted 3 hours. Reporters from every major network crowded into the Millbrook County Courthouse, their cameras capturing every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence that the federal prosecutors laid out like a surgeon displaying diseased organs. The forged deed, the bank records, the text messages between Marcus and the corrupt county clerk, the surveillance footage showing Darnell Vance's pickup truck parked near Camp Liberty an hour before the fire started, the gasoline receipts, the burner phones, the offshore accounts. 17 years of fraud, laid bare in 3 hours. By noon, Marcus Vance's name was trending on every social media platform. By 2 o'clock, his investors had released statements distancing themselves from any involvement. By 4 o'clock, the Vance Development Group stock had crashed so completely that trading was halted. And by 6 o'clock, Darnell Vance was in handcuffs. They found him at a motel outside Richmond, trying to book a flight to Mexico with a fake passport. The passport was amateur work, good enough to fool a small-town clerk, not nearly good enough to fool the TSA database that had been flagged with his information 12 hours earlier. He cried when they arrested him. Actually cried. Tears streaming down his face as he begged the marshals to understand that it wasn't his idea, that Marcus had made him do it, that he never meant for anyone to get hurt. The marshals didn't care. Back in Millbrook, the town was transformed. The same people who had sat silently at the town hall meeting were now giving interviews to anyone who would listen. Earl Washington, the veteran in the VFW cap, appeared on 3 different news programs to talk about Sterling Thorne and what Camp Liberty had meant to generations of soldiers. "Sterling saved my life," Earl told one reporter, his voice thick with emotion. "Not in combat. After. When I came home from Vietnam, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't look my own kids in the eye without seeing things I wanted to forget. Sterling took me up to that ridge and sat with me for 3 days. Didn't say much. Just let me be." He wiped his eyes. That's what the camp was. A place where you could just be. Where nobody judged you or pitied you or told you to get over it. And that man, that Vance, he burned it down like it was nothing. Like 50 years of healing didn't matter. The reporter asked what Earl thought about Hattie Thorne. Earl smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen on his face in days. Sterling used to say that he married way above his pay grade. Said Hattie was the strongest person he ever knew, stronger than any Marine, any general, any president. I always thought he was exaggerating. He shook his head. I don't think that anymore. Meanwhile, in a federal holding facility 30 miles away, Marcus Vance sat in an interrogation room and watched his empire collapse in real time. His lawyer, the new one, a public defender fresh out of law school, had tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecutors had laughed. Actually laughed. The evidence was too overwhelming, the crimes too numerous, the public outrage too intense. Marcus was facing 47 separate charges. The minimum sentence, if convicted on all counts, was 63 years. He was 51 years old. He would die in prison. There has to be something, Marcus said to his lawyer. Someone I can turn on. Someone I can give them. The lawyer sighed. Mr. Vance, you were the top of the pyramid. Everyone else has already flipped on you. Your brother gave a full confession this morning. Your accountant has been cooperating for weeks. Your banker, your clerk, your contractor, they're all pointing at you. What about the old woman, Thorne? She must have done something illegal. Entrapment, maybe, or... Mrs. Thorne. The lawyer actually looked offended. She's cooperating fully with prosecutors. She's provided documentation for every claim she's made. And frankly, Mr. Vance, she's the reason you're not facing murder charges. Marcus blinked. Murder? I didn't kill anyone. The fire you ordered your brother to set? It spread faster than expected. If Mrs. Thorne hadn't already evacuated to a safe location, a location she had prepared specifically because she anticipated violence, she would have been trapped inside. The lawyer leaned forward. You tried to murder a 78-year-old woman, Mr. Vance. The only reason you're not being charged with attempted homicide is that she was smart enough to see it coming. Marcus slumped in his chair. For the first time since this nightmare began, he understood the full scope of what he had done. He had tried to burn down more than a cabin. He had tried to burn down a legacy. And in doing so, he had lit a fire that consumed everything he had ever built. I want to talk to her, he said quietly. Excuse me? Hattie Thorne. I want to talk to her. Face to face. The lawyer stared at him. Why would she agree to that? Because she's been watching me this whole time. Testing me, she said. I failed. Marcus looked up, and for the first time, there was something other than arrogance in his eyes. Maybe I want to know why. What she saw in me that made her decide I deserved this. The lawyer was quiet for a long moment. I'll ask, he said finally. But don't expect anything. That woman has no reason to give you the time of day. Marcus nodded. He knew she would come. He didn't know why he knew. He just did. And 48 hours later, he was proven right. When the walls close in and there's nowhere left to run, what questions would you ask the person who destroyed you? The visitation room smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Marcus Vance sat on one side of the metal table, his wrists cuffed to a chain that ran through a ring bolted to the surface. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on a frame that had lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. The eyes that had once sparkled with arrogance were now hollow, rimmed with red. The door opened. Hattie Thorne walked in. She wore the same navy suit from the groundbreaking ceremony, the same gold pin on her lapel. But today, her expression held something that hadn't been there before. A weariness that went deeper than age, deeper than exhaustion. She sat down across from Marcus and folded her hands on the table. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. You won. This was never about winning, Mr. Vance. Then what was it about? Revenge? Justice? He laughed bitterly. You destroyed everything I ever built. My company. My reputation. My freedom. My own brother won't even look at me anymore. So whatever you wanted, congratulations. You got it. Hattie studied him the way a doctor might study an X-ray, looking for fractures and damage beneath the surface. Do you know what my husband wrote in his journal the day he came home from Korea? She asked. Marcus didn't respond. He wrote, I have seen men become wolves and men become sheep. I have seen cruelty that would make the devil weep and courage that would make angels sing. And I have learned this. The measure of a man is not what he does when the world is watching. It is what he does when he believes no one can see. She leaned forward slightly. I gave you 6 months, Mr. Vance. 6 months to show me who you really were. And every single time you thought no one was watching, you chose cruelty. You chose greed. You chose to step on a flag, mock a dead soldier's memory, and threaten an old woman with violence. I didn't know who you were. Exactly. Hattie's voice hardened. You didn't know I was rich. You didn't know I was powerful. You thought I was just a helpless old woman standing between you and money. And that's when you showed me your true character. Marcus's chains rattled as he shifted in his seat. So this whole thing, the cabin, the disguise, living in poverty for 6 months, it was all a test? It was an opportunity. I wanted to believe that the man trying to buy my husband's sanctuary might have some goodness in him. Some respect for what that land represented. I gave you chance after chance to prove me wrong. And I failed. You didn't just fail, Mr. Vance. You burned down a building that had sheltered hundreds of wounded souls. You laughed while you did it. You called the men my husband saved relics of a dead era. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with controlled fury. My husband pulled 17 men out of a frozen Hell's Cape while bullets flew around him. He spent the rest of his life helping soldiers find their way back from the darkness. And you stood on his grave in your Italian loafers and called it an eyesore. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Hattie wasn't finished. Do you want to know what happened to those loafers? The ones you were so proud of? He stared at her. Garrison collected them from the mud the morning after the fire. They're currently in an evidence locker at the FBI field office, covered in soil samples that place you at the scene of an arson. Your $3,000 shoes are going to help put you in prison for the rest of your life. Marcus's head dropped. His shoulders shook. What do you want from me? His voice was barely a whisper. An apology? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. Does that change anything? Hattie was quiet for a long moment. No, she said finally. It doesn't. Because you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you picked the wrong target. If I had been what you thought I was, a powerless old widow with no money and no connections, you would have gotten away with everything. And you would have moved on to the next victim without a second thought. She stood up. That's the difference between us, Mr. Vance. You see the world as wolves and sheep, predators and prey. You believe that power gives you the right to take whatever you want from anyone too weak to stop you. She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the handle. I believe that power is a responsibility, a duty to protect the people who can't protect themselves. My husband taught me that. Every veteran who walked through Camp Liberty's doors taught me that. She looked back at Marcus one final time. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, surrounded by men who think exactly like you do. Maybe that will finally teach you what you refused to learn when you had the chance. She opened the door. Mrs. Thorne, Marcus called out. Wait. She paused. I never asked, what are you going to do now? With the land? With all of it. Hattie smiled, not a warm smile, but not a cruel one either. Something in between. Something almost like peace. I'm going to rebuild. Not the cabin, that's gone. But the mission. The purpose. I'm building a center that will serve veterans for the next 100 years. A place where men and women who gave everything for their country can find the peace they deserve. And the money? Your money. She almost laughed. Every cent. Every seized asset, every frozen account, every property you thought was hidden offshore. It's all going into the foundation. The Sterling Thorne National Veterans Center will be built with the blood money you spent your whole life accumulating. She stepped through the door. Goodbye, Mr. Vance. I don't imagine we'll see each other again. The door closed behind her. Marcus Vance sat alone in the empty room, chains rattling softly, and finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. What do you think Marcus felt in that moment? Regret for his choices? Or just regret that he lost? The sunset painted the Virginia ridge in shades of gold and amber. Hattie Thorne stood at the edge of the clearing where Camp Liberty had once stood, watching the construction crews pack up their equipment for the night. Behind her, the steel skeleton of the Sterling Thorne National Veterans Center rose against the sky, 3 stories of hope taking shape from the ashes of destruction. It had been 4 months since the arrest. 4 months since the cameras and the press conferences and the trial that captivated a nation. 4 months since Marcus Vance heard a judge sentence him to 61 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His brother Darnell got 23 years. The corrupt clerk got 12. Sheriff Bradley got 15. One by one, every person who had conspired to destroy Camp Liberty had faced justice. And now, something new was rising in its place. Garrison appeared at Hattie's side, silent as always, his presence as steady as the mountains surrounding them. The foundation is ahead of schedule, he said. Structural completion is projected for March. Full operation by summer. Hattie nodded but didn't speak. There's something else. Garrison hesitated, a rare occurrence. We've received over 14,000 applications for the center's residency program. Veterans from every branch, every conflict, every corner of the country. More than we can possibly accommodate. Then we'll build more. Hattie's voice was quiet but firm. Sterling's legacy won't end with one building on one ridge. If 14,000 people need help, we'll find a way to help 14,000 people. Garrison nodded. He had expected nothing less. For a long moment, they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the mountains. The air smelled like fresh lumber and turned earth, the smell of new beginnings. Ma'am, Garrison said finally, "there's one more matter that requires your attention." He handed her a tablet. On the screen was a news article from a small town in West Virginia, 200 miles to the south. The headline read, "Developer threatens historic black cemetery to build luxury condos." Hattie read the article in silence. A 92-year-old woman named Dorothy Mae Jenkins, fighting to save a cemetery where 6 generations of her family were buried. A developer named Preston Whitmore, offering her fair market value, while his lawyers prepared eviction papers. Local officials looking the other way. The same story. Different names. Different place. Same cruelty. Hattie handed the tablet back to Garrison. "Tell me about this Whitmore." Real estate developer out of Charlotte. Net worth approximately $400 million. Known for aggressive tactics against elderly property owners, particularly in communities of color. 3 civil rights complaints filed against him in the past decade, all settled quietly out of court. And Mrs. Jenkins? Retired schoolteacher. Husband was a Tuskegee Airman. She has no living family except a grandson serving overseas. No money for lawyers. No connections. No one fighting for her. Hattie was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was the same smile she had worn on the night of the fire, standing in the ashes of her husband's sanctuary, making a phone call that would change everything. "Ready the plane." Garrison nodded once. He had expected nothing less. "And Garrison? Find out if Mrs. Jenkins has room for a houseguest. I think I'd like to spend some time in West Virginia. How long should I tell her to expect you?" Hattie looked out at the ridge one final time. At the construction site, at the mountains, at the place where Sterling had built something beautiful and a cruel man had tried to destroy it. "As long as it takes." She turned and walked toward the waiting sedan, her steps steady, her purpose clear. Behind her, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had watched over Camp Liberty for 50 years, the same stars that would watch over its successor for 50 more. Some people see an ending in every sunset. Hattie Thorne saw a beginning. And somewhere in West Virginia, a 92-year-old woman named Dorothy Mae Jenkins was about to discover that she wasn't as alone as she thought. The wolves of this world never stop hunting. But neither do the shepherds. And that, my friends, is the true story of the camp on the ridge. A story about a woman who had everything, chose to live with nothing, and brought down an empire with patience, planning, and an unshakable commitment to justice. But I want to know what you think. Was Hattie right to destroy Marcus completely, or should she have shown mercy? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And here's my question for you. If you had Hattie's resources and someone hurt the people you loved, what would you do? Would you forgive, or would you fight? Tell me your answer and share a story of a time when you, or someone you know, stood up against injustice. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it today. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that inspires, challenges, and reminds us all that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that justice exists, even when the powerful think they're untouchable. Until next time, remember, the measure of a person is not what they do when the world is watching. It's what they do when they believe no one can see. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being part of this community. See you in the next story.